So we just talked about cardiac output, what it is, and how to calculate it. Now I want to talk about some of the factors that are going to affect cardiac output. Okay, so to do this, I would like you to take a look at this equation here. Remember that cardiac output is stroke volume times heart rate. And I want you to ponder this question here. How could you change cardiac output? So just take a few seconds to think about that. Okay, so it doesn't take a genius to figure out that if you change stroke volume or if you change heart rate, you're going to end up changing cardiac output. I want to tell you that stroke volume can be affected by these factors here: initial load, contractility, and venous return. Heart rate, as you already know, is regulated by the autonomic nervous system. Okay, so I'd like to go into these factors and talk about what they are and how they affect stroke volume. Okay, so first factor that I'm going to talk about that affects stroke volume is what we call initial load. Okay, um, so to take a look at this phenomenon, we're going to look at this graph here. And what is being illustrated on the x-axis is end diastolic volume. So the amount of blood that's in your ventricles before you contract, okay? On the y-axis is stroke volume, the amount that gets pumped out when you contract. What you can see here is that as we have higher end diastolic volumes, we end up with higher stroke volumes. Okay, so basically, kind of the upshot of this graph is that the heart kind of self adjusts to pump out, like the amount of blood that it pumps out is reflective of the amount of blood that's in it. Okay, so yeah, the more blood you have in the heart, the more blood you're going to eject out of the heart. Okay, next factor I want to talk about is contractility. Contractility is how much the muscle fibers will contract given their initial length or degree of stretch. Okay, so again, let's take a look at this graph to illustrate this concept. Um, let's start with this blue control curve here. Okay, what you're looking at again is end diastolic volume on the x-axis, stroke volume on the y-axis. And what you can see is in the control condition, like we saw in the last slide, basically this is the exact same relationship that we saw in the last slide. As you increase your end diastolic volume, you increase your stroke volume, okay? However, if you add norepinephrine to the heart, like bathed in norepinephrine, okay, what's going to happen is the relationship is going to change, right? So you get this curve right here. And you still have that relationship where you have a higher stroke volume for a higher end diastolic volume, but you can see that the actual values are different. So this has kind of a steeper slope here. If we look at the actual values, what you can see is that under the controlled condition, if you have A for your end diastolic volume, you're going to end up ejecting out this much blood. But if you have A for your end diastolic volume in the presence of norepinephrine, you are going to end up ejecting a much larger amount of blood. So basically what's happening is that the heart is pumping harder to um, to eject more blood for a given end diastolic volume. Okay, so basically what contractility is how strong the heart is pumping, right? So you can either pump weakly to pump out a little bit of blood, or you can pump more strongly to pump out more blood for the same end diastolic volume.